Check the numbers. We know when it comes to fantasy Major League Rugby, it is all about the numbers. So who better to bring on than the stats man himself? James Deeley of MLR Stats joins the show to give our viewers and listeners a leg up in fantasy MLR for the 2025 season. Plus, talk about the latest news and notes from around the league. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 127 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, Matt Yee. Devin Vanderpool is back from his camping trip. I am Ryan Yee. We got a good show for you in this episode 127. We're bringing on a friend of the show, James Deeley of MLR Stats, who has a nice little new project that he has got going that we're going to talk about, plus so much more. But before, guys, hey, how you guys doing? Vandy, good to see you, man. We had a fun show without you last week. We met a new player in the MLR who had some spicy things to tell us about, but we missed you, man.
Yeah, you know what? It was great. You know, just being in the outdoors. Went to a nice little trailer park that happened to have a golf course attached to it. You know,
pretty good. Nothing better.
You know what? Trailer parks, I gotta say, they're the best thing ever. You just drive around a golf cart, drink as much as you want, and then they don't police the roads. They don't do nothing.
So
drive right onto the golf course, drive right off the golf course.
So what you're saying is that why don't we just get a Fantasy Ruckers trailer and move it up to a trailer park in Canada? And that's just our.
I don't know why I have a house. I think if it wasn't for Laura,
we do the podcast from the trailer. We can do the podcast from the trailer. That'd be great.
I wouldn't even have internet. No one could find me.
But good to hear that it was a fun trip, Vandy. Again, we kind of alluded to it. We had a very, very fun show last week. We brought on Canadian scrum half Brock Gallagher, who was on the now no longer existing Dallas Jackals team, who provided some very, very good insight into kind of the fallout of the departure of that team. So if you haven't already, go check out episode 126, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts, it's all there. Very, very insightful conversation that has a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff in terms of what all went down when it came to the whole Dallas situation. Again, have a great show for you here. James Deeley is going to be hopping on to talk a little bit about MLR stats. You know, we love numbers here in the world of fantasy MLR, so why not bring on the stats man himself to talk about all of that? Before we get into it, I will give us a little bit of a shout out, Vandy. Maddie, look at us in the fantasy football, Fantasy Ruckers Gridiron League. We're tied for the top best record in the league, taking down the undefeated team owned by our analytics guru, Nick Johnson.
Nice.
They thought they could take us down, but look at us, moving up.
We had one bad week. We lose Christian McCaffrey. We have one bad week. Everybody starts riding the Fantasy Ruckers. But it's a long season.
It is a long season.
And there's tons of injuries to go around, my friends.
Yes, there definitely is. And we mentioned it on shows before. I do think that dealing with the pains and the sadness and the stress and occasionally the happiness that fantasy MLR brings has hardened us for the fantasy football year. I will say that. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Anyways, we'll get into it right away. But before we do, like we say every episode, if you aren't already, give us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers. Huge traction on our last episode. Boys, at this point in time, the recording of this podcast, we are 4 subscribers away from 100 on YouTube.
Whoa.
Let's get there. 4 people out there.
Oh, what do you get? What does YouTube send you? What, a paper clip or something?
No, I don't know. I mean, it's
how
definitely
many
not
do we
going to
need
be
for one of them buttons?
We're about probably like a million away.
No, 999,900.
Okay,
yeah, right,
100,000.
So
100,000.
No,
99,900.
99,900.
That's how far away we are. 902. That's how far away we are. 904 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
so 4 subscribers. We're getting there slowly but surely. At this rate in time, we'll get there by the time our deathbeds are prepared for us. Maybe we'll see. But hey, like I said, give us a like, subscribe, help us out on that number and that journey to possibly getting one of those buttons. It helps us out along. It is all good stuff. Again, you'll be in the know when it comes to fantasy MLR, some cool stuff. And you'll be able to participate in this movement that is making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. Also, if you aren't already, join our community on Discord, have a lot of fun conversations over there, whether it comes to fantasy MLR or just rugby that's happening around the world. That's a great place to do it and connect with some people that love Major League Rugby just as much as you do. And then finally, we do have the fantasyruckers.com, the official platform for fantasy MLR when it comes to our Fantasy Ruckers show. So check that out. Got all the stats there and how you will be participating in fantasy MLR season long and our weekly challenge each and every week. You ready to get to our guest of the show, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right, and who better to bring on this show for our very first segment of this episode 127 for this news and notes segment than the source that we get it from, right, guys? I mean, we use this guy's Twitter all the time to be latest in the know for
And
everything
website
going
now.
on,
To
and
be
website
fair-
now, which we'll get into. Yeah,
To be fair, he makes us look smart.
it's true. It's
Well,
true.
it's pretty hard to do, Vandy.
People, we like people.
It
who
makes
make us look
makes
smart.
Ryan look smart.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's we
Can't
don't need
help
it. We
us,
don't
Vandy.
we don't
Can't
need to
help
get
us.
to. I like. But anyways, yeah, no, to your point, Vandy, we love people who make us look smart on this show, and why not bring him on for this news and notes segment to keep us in the know? Let's welcome in James Deeley of MLR Stats. James, good to see ya. Longtime friend of the show. I will mention for people who have just maybe followed along in the recent past, James is one of our OG fantasy MLR members. Obviously, he's got bigger and better things going on in the world these days where he doesn't have necessarily as much time to commit to the fantasy world.
dare you.
But anyways, OG fantasy member, MLR Stats, James. I mean, we've had you on before. I think the introduction speaks for itself. How you been, man?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, and congratulations on another fantastic fantasy season. Shame I couldn't compete in it this year. I was following it from arm's length, but
Yeah, there you go.
now you guys all know that what I was preoccupied with, I suppose, and we'll get into that in a bit.
Absolutely. We will get into that. If you haven't heard it, a really, really cool venture that James has been working on for, I would say, maybe a little bit of a long time is probably an understatement, huh, James?
Oh yeah, a little bit of a long time. Is perfect,
Yeah, there you go. But we'll get into it. NA Rugby DB is something that he is released officially this past week. So we'll get into that and talk a little bit about the numbers that are behind that. But of course, you've heard about him. James Deeley runs at MLR Stats on Instagram. You can find him on Twitter at Jam Delay, where he basically posts everything when it comes to numbers around and circulating around the league. So we got a whole bunch of questions for you, James, because like I said at the top of the show, fantasy managers love numbers. And when you want to get the leg up when it comes to fantasy, you look into the numbers and you see what you can try to find. And that's why people were scared. When you joined our fantasy MLR league in that first year that you participated, people were worried, man. They were like, man, the numbers man himself, the stats man himself is going to be competing against us. That's tough.
It put kind of pressure on me. I was like, well, what if I mess this up and go out and lose every single game? It's going to make me look completely ridiculous.
You know what pressure's like? Figuring out the sport and playing the league.
There you go. There's Vandy's perspective in that one.
Is that your excuse, Vandy?
And it will be, and it continues to be.
You got to grasp what you can hold on to when it comes to excuses and find something to
blame.
But James, before we get into kind of talking to you about those numbers, I mean, like I said, when we introduce you, you're often one of those guys, those go-to guys that we look at. Again, we check out Jam Delay for all the latest happening in the league. There's a few sources that we like to go to. Brian Ray, yourself is another one. Rugby Morning, of course, John Fitzpatrick, who we've had on the show before, for everything to be in the notes so that we're up to date. So why don't we go through some of these news and notes and go to the source himself in terms of what is happening in this past week, James. And let's talk about some things that have happened. A whole bunch of retirements have happened over the course of the past week. And I know Maddie has a special place in his heart for one of these guys. Ben Fry of the Dallas Jackals has retired, and Dave Kearney and Nick McCarthy of the Chicago Hounds also hanging up the boots. I mean, these are guys, obviously, Obviously, Kearney, there was a little bit of hope that maybe you do a little bit more impact from a fantasy sense as part owner with the Chicago Hounds from a fantasy sense. But I think Nick McCarthy here is probably the big one that we're missing out here as an impactful 9 in not only league, but fantasy MLR circles.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just to speak to Nick McCarthy as well, he is a capped USA Eagle. So, you know, for American rugby fans, he was born in Michigan. He grew up in Ireland, but he is a capped Eagle. He won a handful of caps with the Eagles, and then 16 with the Hounds in 2024. It's really worth pointing out, I think, actually, Squidge Rugby retweeted my tweet and added this on, which was kind of cool, that he is the first openly gay man to win international caps with a major rugby nation.
Very cool.
Which is really, really cool for Nick. And he's only 28 or 29, I think. So it's a bit interesting one, but I don't know if you know he's got something else planned, or he feels like he's out of contention for the Eagles now that JP Smith is eligible. I'm not, although JP Smith's older than 29, but I'm not quite sure what he must have his reasons.
I mean, he's had a pretty successful career, you know.
Yeah, he has.
Very successful career over in Ireland, and comes here kind of almost like a post, almost like after his peak in some ways, to come here and play for his home nation, being professionally play in his home nation. So, yeah. It'll be sad to see him go, but good luck with everything. And I mean, the one that I'm kind of gutted about is Dave Carney. I mean, no more Jackie Moon in the league, I guess. Kind of bummed out about that.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of got the impression that this was one of the, you know, like we still see Marnonu, and we saw kind of Ben Foden and Matteo Bastero for a bit. Like, the MLR is kind of turning into what Japan used to be, and like it's superstars in the European game or the Southern Hemisphere game that are kind of going and spending their twilight years in a cool country and riding out there playing rugby. Dave Carney's 34, I think, and didn't really have as much as of an impact as a lot of people thought this year. Now he's got, you know, close to 200 caps with Leinster. He was at the 2015 Rugby World Cup with Ireland. Like, he has the credentials to play in this league. He's also part owner of the team, which probably got him a nice in with, like, hey, coach, I'm playing today. Okay. Hey, coach, I'm not playing today. Fine.
Coach's son type situation there.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But again, these are guys that have been impactful in the fantasy circle. Nick McCarthy, again, an adequate 9. I know I drafted him this past season. 39 points for him. Ben Fry was a solid back row streamer when it came on occasion, especially when he was available. Only 5 matches this past year, but he finishes off in round 17, kind of when Dallas was on their streak there towards the end. 22.4 fantasy points in round 17, 18.8 in round 18. I know he was a late waiver wire pickup to kind of have as possible streamer during our championship run. But again, Dave Kearney, the Jackie Moon, like Matthew says, of the league, no longer playing for the Chicago Hounds. Nick McCarthy hanging the knot as well, and including to Ben Fry. Let's move on now to a signing. Again, not as much news and notes here. This is probably the one that I have, and we'll ask James here if he has any inside sources of first scoop, latest news. Oh, Maddie, do you have some sources too that you can? Maybe you'll educate James here. He'll have to credit you and courtesy you for a post that he might have. But before we get to that, there is a signing that we have seen, a South African lock. I'm going to butcher this name, but Malembe Mpofu.
Yep.
All right, pretty good. South African lock has announced his signing with Seawolves Rugby for 2025. Seattle Seawolves obviously bolstering what was a pretty successful season last year and making it to the MLR Shield. They bring in an international lock here that has experience, I believe, playing in the Currie Cup. Is that correct? I want to say. So it should be interesting to see where he slots in there with one of the better teams in the Seattle Seawolves for the upcoming year.
Yeah, no, I'm not quite sure what to, whether they're having some lock turnover over there. He will, Mpofu will use up an international player slot to go along with, quite a core of South Africans. They've got very South African Namibians like Divan Rousseau and Jay Steeling, for example. But Mpofu comes over from the Currie Cup. He won it in his first season there in 2022. Returned to the final again in 2023. So the Pumas are a pretty successful outfit in the Currie Cup. And this year he was playing alongside Ross Brody, which is kind of cool, who's playing down there and seems to have kind of forgotten Canada, Rugby Canada.
Probably for good reason or for good measure.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But interesting. So again, I think the one thing that I will know from this, we'll wait and see kind of what the impact is and if there's a falling out in terms of how this affects other roster moves that Seattle are making. I will tell you, and I think we can tell you, we do have sources that there are signings coming down the line, including with Seawolves Rugby, with the Seattle Seawolves coming up. I think a large part of that, again, if you haven't checked it out, we mentioned it at the top of the show, but we had an interview last week with Dallas Jackals, or I should say former 9 of the Dallas Jackals, Brock Gallagher, who did give us some insight into what kind of the falling out of the Dallas Jackals departure was. He said, according to him, that the dispersal draft happened last Wednesday. We still haven't heard any directive from the league on what took place, how it took place, if it even took place. No idea, but we'll find out, I'm sure.
Nor will we. Not from the league, we won't. We'll find out from someone.
There you go.
It'll be Brian Ray leaking a pick
or James himself.
I've already, a little insight here, guys. I've already seen a tentative draft. I've seen the results of it. Okay. Maybe. I'm not sure. No one's confirmed that that's actually the results, and no one's.
There we go.
You mind sending that over to my people? Thanks.
So we'll see. So it sounds like it has happened. Again, we're waiting the confirmed results of that draft. So I would expect, the reason why I mention this is, one, check out that interview with Brock Gallagher. Very, very interesting stuff in terms of the insight that he brought into. Yeah. He brought a lot. He I think was a lot more open with us than what a lot of players I think would be, which was really, really cool. Again, we appreciate bringing that insight, because I think a lot of fans want to be in the know. They're very invested in this league and want to know kind of what is happening from here, just because the passion of the game and the passion of this league, very cool to see. But the reason why I also bring it up is because expect there to be a lot more signings coming down the pipe in the announcements. I'm sure your weekly post there, James, on when you recap the roster movements.
They're going to get busy.
They're going to get busy and they're going to get full. We're probably going to be going back to some of those two graphic, 2 or 3 page ones.
That.
So we'll get back to that, but be in alert. Check out again at Jam Delay for any of those latest roster moves coming up. Keep refreshing your social media pages, Brian Ray, any of those guys. I'm sure within the next week or two, we're going to see a lot of that coming down. Now, I'll hand it off first. We know that James has got some credible and spicy stuff, but Maddie, let's go to you first.
No. I think let's let James go first.
Okay.
James, I'll round off the news.
Okay, James, is there any, I got to ask, is there any news that we haven't gone over here around the league that people in the Fantasy Ruckers community need to know about? Maybe that you have a tweet in the works going up that we could maybe be first in the know of? Anything around the league that people should know?
There's nothing really kind of, breaking news or anything like that. Although I will say with my sort of tentative dispersal draft I saw, there were a few picks traded. So keep an eye on the trade wire for that. The trade wire is fucking useless, but keep an eye on it. I'm probably going to be I might make a video on that, how much I hate that thing on its own. Yeah.
It is.
It's useful, but it's the worst it could possibly be.
No, I couldn't agree more. All right, well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Again, a lot of shaking up that's going to be happening down the line here as a result of this dispersal draft. Now, Maddie, I'll hand it off to you to wrap up this news and notes.
I got some serious news coming out. I'll start with the more serious one. Antoine Dupont seen in an LA RFC kit, hat and sweater.
Stop it.
Who knows what that means?
Stop it.
I don't know what to say. He was also seen in an LA Chargers uniform catching footballs. Who knows? I don't know.
True.
I'm just saying the pictures out there. He was seen in a hat. Hey.
He's partnered with our partners from the season, Oval E. He is an Oval E ambassador, and they took a little trip with him to LA. And yes, he was seen practicing with Chargers. I don't think the LA RFC is necessarily.
I'm just saying. All I'm saying is I saw him in a hat and a sweater.
We need to call up friend of the show Andrew Coe, and he would know, and he'd be pretty pumped.
He might know.
He'd be getting passes from Antoine Dupont. But anyways, that's not the only news. I got another news coming straight out of the Pacific Northwest. Vandy, you're gonna want to listen to this because this might be a good role for you. Seattle Seawolves are looking for a new Rocky the Seawolf replacement. Vandy,
You might be in line, buddy. I think that might be the job for you.
Pack up the bags,
Do you
get
think,
Louis
do you think
and
they're going to
Laura.
make me move to Seattle?
Yeah.
Get
Hey.
Louis and Laura in a car, head out to Seattle. We need a Rucky the Seawolf. That's crazy because
this is
we've
only
actually chatted-
important because
we've
I
actually-
was gonna say Rocky the Seawolf. I know has been a supporter. I think was on a couple live streams.
Yep.
In the
He's-
chat,
I'm
supporting
still
our
waiting.
show.
I'm not a Seawolves fan per se because I feel like that would have been maybe jumping on the bandwagon, but I do have the receipts to go back to one of our live streams where Rucky the Seawolf told me he was going to send me one of their away jerseys, and I never got
I don't
it.
think he. I don't think he has that type of pull.
We'll have to talk. We'll have to talk to
Seems
new Rucky
like
the Seawolf.
he's actually got no pull now.
They sent me a
because
home
they're
jersey,
looking for a
Ryan.
new one. Oh,
All
I
right,
know,
what's it
I know
pay?
that it's.
I'm interested.
spicy.
Let's go.
good for Rocky the Seawolf. I mean, he just traveled to Northampton, I think, to watch a premiership game, and then now he just said, "I'm out of here." Now they're looking for a new one. Good for
Going out
him.
on top.
That's all the
Yeah.
news I got.
I got
All
one. Reese Zammit signed with the Jags practice squad, actually.
Yeah.
And he might as well
All right, what do
play.
you do, live
He might as
under-
well play
live
with
under
how
a
bad they
rock?
are.
That is true. Vandy, you might have missed the service there with you camping last week. That has been something that we've known.
A news for like 2 months.
Yeah, I know. Nobody's been talking about it.
Well, hey, you are our football guy, so we got to give you the light at some point.
I'm a nothing. All right.
No. We like you on this show, Vandy. All right. Well, hey, there's your news and notes. Again, love to have that with James. Some little bit of spicy tidbits there. Again, just I think keep in the know. Follow at Jam Delay to see
We
any
gotta
alerts
look
come
out
down.
for this Twitter account. This
We do.
Jam Delay is gonna come out with some
Spice.
crazy tweets with this
Yeah.
Expansion draft
We'll see.
or the
But
dispersal draft.
Let's get into a deeper conversation here, James. Probably about the thing that you're
Ooh.
anxiously awaiting to talk about. I am sure you're never bogged down with numbers, and you never love not talking about numbers. I mean, you have a social media account called MLR Stats, so why don't we talk about some MLR stats? Again, I think what you do in terms of, we've talked about this off the air, but like really the goal with a lot of these ventures and projects, because we all have day jobs, right? We all do this in our
course,
free time. And I think the main goal of this is spending this extra time and this investment into kind of creating what we do. You with MLR Stats, us with the Fantasy Ruckers and Fantasy MLR, is really to just grow the game and get exposure to Major League Rugby and really just have more content out there that allows people to discover the league, get more invested in the league, and really just be in the know. And again, from our side, it's through Fantasy MLR, and through you, it's just really cool stats, really cool numbers, things that maybe people aren't keeping track of as of right now. So let's get into that. I mean, for you, sifting through all those numbers and sifting through all that stuff, I mean, take me through kind of what it's like to go through all those numbers and the crazy database that you must have, and like how you find and pinpoint some of these, like some of these, oh, this is the all-time guy here, this is a guy that's reached a milestone. Like, do you have a supercomputer in your home that has its own room that you can kind of just punch some numbers in? Because it is sometimes crazy to see some of the stats that you do come out with.
No, I don't.
You are the supercomputer.
I wouldn't
His brain.
even go that far. I mean, thankfully, you can't argue with numbers. So if I'm right, then I know I'm right. Then there's no arguing with that. But it really is sort of this database you mentioned is 3 or 4 different kind of Google sheets. It's basically I'm working on Excel, and as we'll talk about later, I now have this website which is kind of helping me to do a lot of these things as well, actually. So I kind of wanted to be, during the regular season at least, was sort of regular posts about, weekly updates to a load of different categories. So I was posting, top point scorers, try scorers, top tacklers, top meters gained, I call them meter eaters, and then usually one other kind of milestone a week, whatever it may be. A player hits a milestone, a team hits a milestone, or something cool happened in a game, something like that. In the off season, it's a bit different. There's no games happening. I need to kind of learn to space this stuff out. So that's when I can really dive deeper into the numbers I've already put together, and kind of figure out, oh, hey, this could be a cool thing to do for during the season, and I have the time to prep that, or like, oh, hey, this happened during the season that no one, we all missed, so I can make a post about that when I've got more time to do it. If I'm posting 5 times a day, like you said, Ryan, earlier, we have day jobs. It's usually me getting everything ready on a Monday, and then being like, okay, I just need to remember to post at this day, this day, this day. But everything's usually ready Sunday night, Monday morning. No, I don't get bored of it. This is my hobby. I still love it. It's cool to see these numbers and these teams kind of develop these records, and like Seattle and San Diego, for example, have this like feud going about who is the winningest team in MLR history across all seasons, and they're really, really close at the minute. There's loads of different teams that are kind of pushing into like the middle ground or overtaking a load of teams that fell out of MLR previously. There's loads of things happening all the time. So
Right.
It's I'm sure I miss probably half of the milestones that are achieved, probably more. But I think if I was pointing out that this person was the first person in this season to reach 20 points for their team, no one would really care. It's sort of about picking and choosing what other people would also find interesting, because I find it all interesting. That's why I'm doing this stuff.
It is fair enough. And I guess related to that, because I know that sometimes your Twitter account and the MLR Twitter account, there's sometimes you guys are almost competing in terms of who shows what stat, who shows the stat first. I know that you are most of the time first to the jump, but
is that what we're calling it, Maddie? Is it competing, not copying?
No, not copying, competing. You're friendly rivals.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping grow the game. But how have you what's your opinion on how the MLR has been using stats in the promotion of the game? And whether that's kind of on Twitter, whether that's on other social media, or whether that's in the game on some of those Fox games that we saw. What has been your opinion on it all?
Well, prior to 2024, it was dire. It was awful. I mean, it wasn't dire. It didn't exist. There was nothing to be dire. It just wasn't there. They weren't promoting.
It was you, James. It was you. You were it.
Basically, yeah, it was me. Now they are they're moving in the right direction. I'll give them that. They're starting to post these things. They're starting to post kind of graphics about stats leaders in the season. They posted the graphic the other day about these players reached 300 career points. All three of them are wrong, but they post it anyway. I don't know how their numbers are so off. I don't understand it. And like they posted something about Sam Windsor being the all-time points leader. Wrong. He's actually got 2 points more than they posted. Like I don't know where they're getting their numbers, because they're always wrong. Mm-hmm. And they posted something early in the season like, here's the league's meters gained leaders, and they posted the numbers for meters ran. So they were like all 300 higher than that, and it was like Reece McDonald has ran a kilometer in 4 games. Like that's stupid. No, he hasn't.
I mean, just get James. I will tell you, history will look back, and you will be considered the godfather of MLR numbers. Does that name? I'll bestow that name to you now. Does that make you feel?
You should not be bestowing names to anybody.
Why?
Okay?
We can do this
because you've bestowed enough names to yourself.
Yeah, commissioner.
Yeah, I'm the name bestower. I'm the supreme commissioner, and now James is the godfather of stats.
I like James's name. I just think we can't keep yours. You can't be bestowing too many names. I think you should just bestow it to James. Let's remove the other name you bestowed upon yourself.
No, I think the Supreme Commissioner and the Godfather could rule the MLR world. Does that sound pretty good to you, James?
Sounds like some kind of underworld mob bosses.
This is what we need to start.
Yeah. This is where the uprising begins.
You want change? Be the change.
Yeah, there you go. But no, I mean, again, you're right though. There, James, is that I think any way that teams or people can consume these numbers was huge, and I think there has been a void of that for a long time, and you filled that void for quite some time. And yeah, the league has improved there. But again, it's kind of leading to the next question.
Wait, before we move on, James, did you even get to see the Fox stat stuff when being in Canada? You didn't, right? Or did you get it on another way?
I did get some of it.
Okay.
A lot of the time, the broadcast for TRN outside of the US just takes the Fox feed, so I saw a lot of it. And I will say credit to a lot of the commentary teams, like Ben Holden especially, is always messaging me about like, hey, is this correct? Like, hey, have you got anything cool I can use? Hey, and that's cool. Like,
are you serious?
Yeah, Ben's been like supporting me and like thinking, just sending me a message every once in a while. Pretty much since he started commentating in MLR, He really
No,
wants to
next
get
time-
this right.
yeah,
next
He's
time-
really
next time he-
interested in this sport and in this league. It's really, really good.
Next time he texts you, let him know that there's a spot for him in our fantasy MLR league, and he can just join there and have a little bit of fun. And he'll be basically looking at the stats and asking you for more stats,
Well.
probably even more if he was invested in that. But
I will.
I guess my
Shameless plug. Shameless.
shameless.
A little bit of shame.
No shame. No shame.
Shameless.
But James, I guess my point being, and to lead into my next question in terms of filling that void and kind of taking that step up again, I think the MLR at this point is at that kind of basic level of taking generic stats that I guess any league should have in terms of part of their content package and part of their broadcast package. You still, I think, take that step up in terms of some of these interesting trends that we do see. I guess that leads to the question is, what throughout the 2024 season was your maybe favorite stat that you came out with, or your favorite kind of trend number that really had you sitting there and before you posted it was like, holy crap, like that's a really cool number that I did not think was going to be a thing, but it is. Was there one that kind of popped out to you?
Not off the top of my head now that you're mentioning it, but there were some really, really cool races, like stats races through the season. Like the fight between Mac Mason, who was in like top scorer for pretty much the entire season, and Jason Potros, who picked him right at the end. Like that was a really good fight. And then just like just how dominant Corey Daniel was as a tackler over everyone else in the league is just insane to me. 276 tackles. The league say 77. I don't know where they got that from either. But I posted something about that, and then I think it was 2 weeks later they said, "Oh, by the way, this guy broke the all-time record." It's like, yeah, I posted that 2 weeks ago, dude.
Yeah.
What are you doing? No messages, no thank you, no nothing. But
Yeah.
We thank you.
Hey,
of
we
course.
thank
You get all the love and thanks here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
But yeah, I mean that Corey Daniel one was absolutely ridiculous.
Nuts.
Yeah, it was crazy how from a fantasy side he was literally carrying his fantasy performances through
Off
just
tackles.
tackling.
Just tackles.
Yeah, that's what he does. And though like that thing, he is so inconsistent. He's so consistent week in, week out about getting like 25 tackles a week. It's ridiculous. And that's not even, he didn't even end up with the league's highest in a single game. That was Dylan Nell, recorded, I think it was 30.
Absolutely.
And that's only the second time
with that too.
Yeah. That's only the second time in history that a player's made 30 or more in a game in an MLR
It's like
game.
stats like that.
Yeah.
It's like stats like that where he just pulls it. James just has these in his back pocket. Just like, hey, you want to know this cool thing? 30's the second highest ever. That's
Who has the most curb stomps? Dylan Nell?
Yeah.
Probably Dylan Nell. Yeah. One.
But then I guess that leads into, like we mentioned at the top of the show, James, you were one of our OG members when it came to participating in Fantasy MLR and giving it a go. You were part of the full kind of fledged that turnover to us, including a lot of more in-depth stats that made Fantasy MLR that much more enjoyable. For a guy that's been able to step back from the fantasy world for a year, in terms of advice that you may have, because I don't know if you heard, but we opened it up to the general public and people were able to experiencing it for the first time, which is really a lot of fun to see people who hadn't been able to experience that before join their leagues, play it. For them listening and watching right now, for you taking that step back, are there any numbers that you would recommend to fantasy managers that you've seen as you sift through the numbers that you feel dictates best on how good someone's going to be in Fantasy MLR, whether that's tackle numbers, meters gain numbers? Was there any correlation that you discovered over that course of time when participating in it, and then it's kind of looking outside in last year that you would recommend or suggest to Fantasy MLR managers that are planning to play in 2025 or have played?
Go for the heavy tacklers.
I like that.
Like Matt said, like Corey Daniel was carrying his team through. Tackles just seem to be kind of weighted so that they can, even if you have no one that scores a try, a lot of tackles can save you, and you get some pretty strong victories out of that. Go for the heavy tacklers. Now, that tends to be back rows. You only get one of them. So
You flex them.
and then see if you can find any other gems that are pretty heavy on tackling for that position. Go for that. Like lock, which is typically, for fantasy anyway, quite a low scoring position.
Yeah.
You can find a heavy or ideally a back row player that plays at lock, for example, some of the time, go for that.
Some
Oh,
juicy
see
numbers there.
that fantasy instinct, having
Yeah.
those dual positions, never
100%.
leaves you, James. Never leaves
It's like
you.
riding a
There
bike.
you go.
Yes.
It is like riding a bike. No, it's funny. That's like kind of reminds me of Judd Matty. That's kind of how
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
kind of
Well, yeah, I mean, when you find a 9 that tackles,
yeah,
a guy like
exactly.
JP Smith, who also plays pretty on the line defensively, and Judd was another guy like that, and Andre Warner was
Yes.
another guy this year who also played defensively on the line rather than scraping behind it. Oh, it's just that's a gem right there. I mean, Andre Warner, I think most of his points were from tackling.
So
Oh,
when
actually, if Michael
Oh.
Manson is in the league, get him.
Yeah, okay, that's not
That's
a
just a
stat.
game
That's
breaker.
a,
That's
that's
just-
a
we have
to get
Manson.
him.
That's just
We haven't had a repeat champ yet. The guy that has won the MLR basically our fantasy season has never basically even been contention
yeah,
the next
we
year.
never had
everybody
top to
has
top
sophomore
back.
slumps.
Every-
Every year,
every
a player
year.
it's a sophomore slump. I had Fido
see.
the first year,
Or they
Yeah.
just leave the
Uh,
MLR outright.
yeah.
But
And we'll see if Michael Manson is able to break that trend. What I'm also hearing is that if you want to play it safe, Corey Daniel at the number 1 pick may not be a
I mean-
bad.
I don't know. I heard
Well-
him say Michael Manson over everything.
Well, that's the thing about Corey Daniel is he's had a great tackling season with 250, then injuries, then a great
Yeah.
tackling
Fair
season
enough.
at 270,
Hey.
then who knows?
can tackle on the bench.
James,
And we know-
that's fantasy, man.
Exactly.
I know.
Fantasy and injuries go hand in hand
Oh.
there. So it is something there. Well, moving off from kind of the number standpoint, and if you don't know, James does live north of the border.
I do.
And is a avid, or I should say former avid
Uh-huh.
Toronto Arrows fan.
Now
I
Chicago
do see
Hounds,
you.
I think.
I think Chicago Hounds. I think the people spoke, right? You were a
The
Chicago
people
Hounds
spoke,
fan.
and I was Chicago Hounds. Yeah, who knows for 2025? I don't think I'm going to do
Oh,
it.
it's a yearly thing. Okay.
It
Come
might
to the
be. I
Bible
haven't
Belt.
even
I
decided
didn't know
yet.
that. You heard it here first. Why
Yeah.
wasn't that in the news and notes segment? We should have said that. If that's
I
a
haven't
thing.
even decided yet. I'm going to see if they pull out of MLR first before I just.
Oh, okay, there
Come
we
to
go.
Utah.
There we go. Well, I do see you also wearing the Dallas Jackals jersey there.
Yeah.
You did. There's a post on your Twitter account where the jersey literally came. What was it? Like a day or two
It was a
after
day or
the
two
announcement.
afterwards. Yeah.
Announcement that Dallas was pulling out. I will say that my choice this season, I guess we can go there. You know, why don't I do that too? If the Godfather is doing it, the Supreme Commissioner is doing it too. I was a Dallas Jackals fan for less than 1 season. They sent me a scarf, so I have a Jackal Den scarf hanging here in my office, and now I can't even use it because they're. But maybe it'll be worse.
Memorial.
Hey, you know what?
It's,
You're kind of like James too. You know, OGDC, then Dallas. Now what's your team next year?
Yeah, sure.
You
Why
switch
not?
yearly too.
Yeah,
It's a
why
wagon
not?
hopper.
Yeah, the Supreme Wagon Hopper Commissioner. That's what we're calling here. But James, we bring this up because obviously the talk of the town has been the departure of the Dallas Jackals and kind of the fallout from that and how it really came out of the blue. We've talked about this, we hammered home, so we don't need to talk about the depths of it too much. Again, rumors were happening. Finally came out. We had Brock Gallagher on to give us the insight into that. Check out that interview if you want to be in the know of that. But the reason why I bring it up, I know it's going to kind of touch some maybe fresh wounds for you, but
Fresh,
the
it's been a
Toronto
year.
the Toronto Arrows, you can't pull the arrows out of the heart of James Deeley. Okay, we know that James loved that team. Okay, he's wearing the
You know-
shorts right now. He told us that before the show.
Fair,
He's
you know,
still wearing
every-
the shorts.
Oh, you
Every
can't
time
just
I-
pull
every
the
time I-
cat out of the bag like that.
Every time I drive by the Avro Arrow exit sign on the highway, I just do a little salute to the sky.
But James, for you as a fan, because we know there's a whole bunch of Dallas Jackals fans out there that are kind of going through similarly what you went through a year ago. I mean, just talk about the gutting experience it is to kind of be on track, to kind of be on the up and up. And then kind of have the curve. The arrows were a little bit different in that last season. I get it. But Dallas kind of being on the up and up and then having the carpet pulled underneath from you. And just all of a sudden, there's not this team. I'm sure a whole bunch of rugby fans in Dallas are just absolutely shocked. I mean, take us through kind of what it felt like for you and maybe any words of advice you might have for Dallas Jackals fans to continue enjoying MLR because it is difficult to see.
Yeah, so I mean, I did make a little video about it when the announcement came out. Basically just saying, It's gutting. It's heartbreaking. And if you are a Dallas Jackals fan and have been for longer than Ryan, for more than a season, more than half a season, you'll know that it wasn't easy to support the Jackals.
No.
Their all-time standing is played 50, won 9. It's
Oof.
rough. It
And
was
they fell
rough
off one
being-
stanchion.
Yes,
It's rough being it was rough being a Dallas Jackals fan. They did have a 0-16 season, which had all kinds of extenuating circumstances. In fact, even before that, they had problems because they were supposed to be a founding member of MLR. That went sideways. Then they were supposed to join in 2020, and that went sideways because of COVID. Then 2021, they had a manager lined up, and he couldn't join because of visa reasons. So Elaine Vasi had to step in. Then they had half their roster injured, like because of a freak accident and outside, and I think it was in a club or something.
Nah,
It just
they
absolutely
fell off a shaky stanchion there.
Yeah,
Just like their season.
well, I don't think their season ever really got started, unfortunately. They never really got onto the stanchion to begin with. But when they got their first franchise win, which was against Toronto, funnily enough, it really was like, oh my God, this has been like years in the making for these fans.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for them. I'm so happy it was at home in front of those fans. And then this season, especially, their record was 6-10, but they had, I think, 9 of those 10 losses were within a score. They were the most entertaining team to watch in 2024 by far. Every single game was a nail biter. They beat the Houston SaberCats, the 14-2 SaberCats in the playoffs in their first ever playoff game. Like, they really looked like they were going places. And that was with, like, Sam Gola was injured for most of the season.
Yeah.
And Geronimo Gomez-Vara had probably, I will say, the best MLR performance of all time in that Houston game. Like, unbelievable. And they almost pipped the Seawolves to that Western Conference final. There was so much to be excited about for the Dallas Jackals. And then, like Brock said in the interview, these players and these fans weren't aware that they'd lost 30% of their investors already. Like, that was in January, right, Brock said. So that was before the season even started. No one knew the team was for sale until, the season ended and there was some very low kind of rumblings about something going on. But unless you were really dialed in and chronically online, like us guys, you guys have a podcast for it, I have a website and I'm on podcasts about MLR. Unless you're really in the know, it's going to hit you out of the blue that, they've pulled out. With this really kind of iffy statement from the league about a controlling interest transfer, which is just rubbish, to be honest. It means the sale.
Yeah.
It means they're trying to sell it. It won't come back as the Dallas Jackals if it does at all. But it's really, really gutting. Especially as, like I said, it's their first real taste of success this season.
Yeah.
And it was taken away from them almost immediately. They had a fantastic team that this season. They were fun to play, fun to watch. They played really, really entertaining rugby. They have a cool jersey. Their City Edition jersey, which was like the Texas theme one, that was fucking awesome. Like, it's just such a shame that they had to end like this. And unfortunately, what Brock was describing is pretty similar to how we've seen other teams go.
Mm-hmm.
The Toronto Arrows, which is the one I can speak to most, the players were made aware the morning of, about an hour or two before the announcement went out that the Arrows were withdrawing. And that was because the staff and the management didn't even know for the Arrows until maybe 2 or 3 days before that, when the investors that they thought they had lined up suddenly pulled out. So they thought, everyone in the Arrows thought they were good to go at least for 2024, and then that was pulled out in front of them as underneath them as well. I hear it was a pretty similar situation in New York, but what I will say for Dallas Jackals fans is, I think there was some news came out today about the RFU in England actually accepted a proposal from Worcester Warriors to re-enter in the Championship, the second tier of English rugby. Worcester, for anyone that wasn't watching or paying attention to English rugby, they folded a few years ago from the Premiership. It looks like they're coming back. We have seen a team return to LA, completely different franchise. I'm sure Atlanta fans aren't too thrilled about it, but there is a team return to LA. Never say never.
Sure.
I think it's a lot more
Yeah.
likely, given that MLR is headquartered in Dallas,
You're right.
that a team will return to Dallas than probably Toronto,
Sure.
just because of the border issues. But never say never. I know for sure that the fan base for MLR up here and pretty much for rugby in general has just completely evaporated pretty much.
Yeah.
I used to go to the Arrows games with sort of anywhere from 8 to 15 of my friends. They don't really care about MLR anymore. They don't even care about the Vancouver Highlanders. That's 3,000 miles away on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
They just, they don't care anymore. They don't have a team.
Yeah.
I'm one of very, very few Arrows fans that took my allegiances or stuck my allegiances with MLR and followed, sort of tied myself to the Chicago Hounds, but not really. I followed it as a neutral, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the big part about it is like that's exactly the opposite of what we want to happen, right? Like this is the early stages of a league where you're trying to capture new people, not lose your existing fans. And again, having a team in your backyard is such a big part of that I think keeps people invested. They're kind of like what you mentioned, James. There's very few people like you and I and Maddie and Vandy who are just invested in the league itself just to be invested in the league. I think all of us kind of come from a league first standpoint, especially from a fantasy MLR background, because we're just so invested in the players, and maybe that will help in a way to keep people invested when this turbulent team departure does happen, because you are kind of keeping an eye on specific players rather than just teams themselves. But to your point, it's hard, and I can only imagine kind of what that sentiment and what that feeling is like. I will say, to the flip of the same coin, I know there was a sense of comfortability last year with the departure of the Arrows and the Iron Workers. It was kind of a kick to the gut, where like, a reminder, like, oh crap, we're still in the early ages. And the fact that the league kind of pushed through that and was able to come out and keep and add a couple teams and get back to 12 here, which was shocking. I think there was a sense of optimism moving forward. Now it kind of gets hurt with that with the departure of the Dallas Jackals, but it is a reminder that this is still a very young league, and the difficulties of breaking through the professional sports landscape in North America, especially with a niche sport like rugby, is still tough. And we're going to power through it. It needs content like this and like what James is doing to help that move along. But it is a reminder that we are still in the early stage of this. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, well, yeah, we are. We are still in the early stages of this. But I as I mentioned in the video I made, we can't keep using that as an excuse for that much longer. We're 8 seasons in. It's still early, for sure. That is a completely valid argument. I'm not taking anything away from that. But like I said in the video, if we get to seasons 11, 12, beyond the 10th year, and this is still happening, then people are going to get apathetic. Why would they tie their horse to a team if it could go bust any minute?
Right. Right. And that goes deeper too. Like, why buy the merchandise? Why buy tickets? And why invest? Because I mean, we're all sports fans here.
Yeah.
Right. Investing in a team takes a lot of time, money, and effort. Like, I mean, to attach yourselves to a thing. And you're right. That's a great point. If they're just going to fold up and leave, like, why even do that in the first place, right?
I think too, if they worked on communication, because there's nothing worse than, like you said, investing your time, your money, buying merch. You basically your time's valuable. So spending your time on something, I would say, even from a fan of other sports, lack of communication, lack of information is just is mind-boggling. And then it gets deeper when you talk, to run it back to the show, when you're talking, a fantasy thing. Football, for an example, guy gets hurt, they need to disclose injuries, whatever. That's just providing information. Hockey, they just tell you lower body, upper body, less communication, but it's still there. James, would you say if communication kind of went up, if these teams were more kind of in the know with the players and everything, would that do a lot, or do you think it's way beyond just simple communication?
I think that would do something similar to what I'm trying to do with the stat stuff. It would give fans another kind of dimension to kind of get their teeth stuck into and get invested in players and week to week squads and stuff like that. Some teams were quite good at posting injuries, even if it was just like the Free Jacks this year saying, "Oh, they're unavailable, injured or unavailable, whatever."
Yeah.
That's better than nothing.
Better than nothing.
Yep.
Exactly.
I think there is value in that. Now, I don't think any team is ever going to be like, "Hey, we're really low on money." No one's going to ever do
True.
that. Like, there's
True,
going to be
yeah.
no transparency
We're
about that.
broke.
Probably no transparency about wages ever, unless they're signed in the CBA, which may or may not be coming with this MLRPA. It's a difficult one because there's so much to kind of improve on in terms of communication. You know, a lot of these teams don't. The Dallas Jackals were quite bad with communication. Let's be honest.
Awful.
A lot of the teams have been in, in previous seasons. I think San Diego Legion, for example, have completely just abandoned the use of their Twitter account, which has something like 10,000 followers. They've just stopped using it for some reason. But that doesn't just. I'm not saying that communication should just come from the teams. There needs to be more communication from the league, just in general. You know, if they're having the problem of teams folding all the time, although they've said themselves the league is strong, because why the hell would they say the league is falling apart?
Yep.
Nick Benson needs to be on every single talk show all the time, every single interview all the time, and I just don't see him.
Yeah,
That's true.
That's a great point.
He needs to be promoting the league. He works for it. He's in charge. Whereas someone, I know Will Hooley and Alex Corbisiero are doing quite a good job of promoting stuff and kind of tying it together a little bit with the Premiership, with what they're doing with the rundown, which is pretty fantastic if you ask me. But that needs to come from the league. Whereas the officials, like, I'm sure they are doing stuff in the background about trying to get new investors, but get new fans.
Yeah.
You know what,
It's
James?
a fantastic sport. Like, what are you doing?
That's a great point, because I remember I was very early on watching the UFC, and way before it is what it is now, when it was just a growing sport, and Dana White was everywhere. You couldn't talk about the UFC even now without talking about Dana White. And that's what it takes to grow. And back then, fighting was a niche sport. It really was. You had boxing, but you didn't have what MMA is today. And the fans weren't there, but Dana White was everywhere. And that's a great point. I never thought of that from that angle before, but why aren't you promoting it everywhere if the league is strong?
And to your point, Vandy, most commissioners are, you know them, right?
You
They're
know
the face of the league, right?
Roger Goodell.
Right.
Gary
to kind of put a bow on this, and not to be so ho-hum, and I don't want to make this sound like it's dreary and kind of pessimistic about that. For you, James, what is your optimism level in 10 years' time on where this league stands? I like to think that we've seen this league be resilient. We've seen them go through COVID. We've seen them go through a lot of team departures and a whole bunch of stuff before. I get your point in saying, when is it that no longer an excuse? I'm pretty confident that the MLR, especially with the World Cup coming to U.S. soil within the decade, soon is right around the corner, that the MLR is going to be able to thrive and bounce back from this. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think the league is going anywhere. I think the core of it is really strong. The likes of Seattle, San Diego, New England, like the core with those kind of teams is solid. They're getting great fans through the door. New England is probably going to have to start thinking about moving stadium. They're filling it up so much.
Yeah.
And I'd like to. It will stick around. I'm very confident it's going to stick around in some form. We'll see what happens with the schedule and the format when it's 11 teams next year.
Yeah.
We've already seen World Rugby kind of get involved at arm's length by just kind of summoning Anthem out of thin air, which is an interesting point, because they did that 6 weeks before the season starts.
Sure.
But have said that Dallas's sale won't be done before 2025.
Yeah.
They can summon up a team out of nowhere. Why not?
Yeah.
But that's a different point. It will. MLR will be around. I think so. I think it will only kind of start to snowball as we move towards 2031 and 2033. Look at even it's the women's side of things, but look at the effect that Ilona Mayer is having on rugby generally.
Right.
Like, that's huge for getting more fans involved in rugby generally. It's a huge boost that she's an American. And people are going to start to go, we play rugby, cool. Oh wow, we've got this league now. That's probably going to be jumped on by the WER, the Women's Elite Rugby, that's starting up next year as well. That's great. That just means more rugby. Hopefully, they won't put a team or too many teams in cities with MLR teams, so they won't dilute the audience. Or if they do, hopefully they can partner with them and have kind of back-to-backs or something like that. And that will only help to strengthen things as well. I don't see the league going anywhere. It's going to be here. People that are saying it's crumbling and everything, they are just trolling, if you ask me. They don't. Yeah. Every single one of these cases has been different. Every single team pulling out, and two of them were cheats, so that doesn't even count really. It's strong. Yeah. MLR is going to keep going and going to get better.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Sam. I think we all agree with that, Sam. I think for us here on this podcast, and because we've been following this league for so long and been so invested in it, the love for this league is strong, right? And I think the day I remember when we found out that we were going to have professional rugby in our backyards and not, haphazardly done it when, I forget what the league was called before, pro rugby or whatever. Yeah. When we saw kind of, this growing, it was so exciting. And I think we need to remember that there's going to be growing pains. To James's point, that excuse is going to go away and that we won't be able to rely on that as a crutch. But I think to an extent, we share that same optimistic sentiment that this league is going to continue to thrive, and hopefully, we'll be able to put all this hardship behind and everything.
And sorry, Ryan, just to finish.
No, you're good.
It's happened at kind of the worst time of the off season as well, I will say.
Right.
There's no news happening. We're early in the off season. The draft's done and out of the way. No other news. So we're just lingering on this for ages. Once things start to get rolling, once we start to, get signings announced, we've only had 2 so far, new signings, they're both from Seattle. Once we start to get new signings and players involved, once we start to hear about kits, once we start to hear about the format and the schedule and everything, the excitement is going to build. It just so happens that this is at the kind of
the dead time. There's nothing else to talk about. So we're here on this show talking about it for 20 minutes about kind of all that stuff. No, I get that. So we're excited for the more news to come out. All right. Well, last thing here, James, before we let you go, we got to talk about your new venture here. And you announced it earlier on within the past week about what this was something that you were doing. But welcome. NA Rugby DB, then I guess the North American Rugby Database, is that kind of what it stands for? And kind of you can check it out, narugbydb.com. It's on socials now, at NA Rugby DB. James, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? We talked about it at the start, where it's kind of a place where all the numbers is kind of controlled in one spot, and you can kind of sift through all the years and everything. I've been on the website, looks great. You could really spend hours and hours and hours sifting through all that done, and you can try to do your best imitation of James Deeley and spend your site and see what you can find. Tell us a little about NA Rugby DB, James.
So this is absolutely kind of the culmination of my hobby and passion project, which I've been doing since I think I started during the 2021 season with like these janky graphics that were frankly horrible, but they were better than nothing at the time, and I've moved on from there. And I really started to put this in action sort of a few years ago when I was like, funnily enough, I was actually I was listening to a podcast about the Maple Leafs, the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NHL, and they were mentioning this website, HockeyDB. And I was like, why don't we have something like that for rugby? And there was like, I could find some stuff, but it wasn't really, there was some trying to do kind of every single rugby player ever from every league. And that was just way too much. And it was sort of missing a lot of stuff, because how the hell could you keep up with all of that?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I already have all the data and all the names of players who have played in this league. I'm going to see if I can do it myself. And I don't know anything about web design or anything about websites or anything like that. It's completely self-taught, and it's cobbled together into this. The NA Rugby Database, which you mentioned, is North American Rugby Database. Yes, Ryan. It's not called MLR Stats because, firstly, I don't want to get sued in case the league get angry about it. Secondly, if I ever get the capacity where I can focus on another league, such as the Women's Elite Rugby or such as Super Rugby Americas, which, I know it says North America, there is still a team in there for now. I'll be able to do that. I'll be able to focus on that. Even like the Premier Rugby Sevens, I could start to focus on that as well and just be an all-encompassing kind of rugby site for North America. So that's the end goal. Right now, it's just MLR because I do not have the time. But it has.
Come on, quit your day job. I think this is gonna go
maybe
big
one day.
places, man.
That would be the dream. But I like to eat and I need to pay rent. So not yet.
It is funny. What I think is so cool about this is just the parallels in your MLR stats venture and here with us on the Fantasy Ruckers is just like that wasn't available for us. Like for you, there wasn't a place where people could go and just kind of peruse numbers and look at what is going on in North American rugby when it comes to stats. In this case, the MLR. For us, it was like, hey, there's no fantasy thing. You know what? Screw it. We're both crazy enough, you and I, James, I think, and that's why I think we deserve the Supreme Commissioner title and the Godfather title. God. We earned it.
One of those were earned. One of those were earned.
Is that we just are crazy enough to be like, hey, let's just do it ourselves. It's not like it's a crazy idea, but it's nothing out of the box in terms of creative. It's just figuring out the time to do it. And I think that's really something really, really cool that you came up here with NA Rugby DB. It's going to be a website that we will be using a whole bunch, I am sure. I think my suggestion to fantasy managers out there is you use the website as well to kind of get the leg up in terms of stats. It's all there for you, past years, this year's, the latest when it comes to all things MLR, and hopefully in the future, James, like what you're saying, even to more kind of rugby around North America as well. But it is a very awesome thing. And like I said, you've been a pivotal piece in growing the MLR and doing that and what was MLR stats and has now evolved to include NA Rugby DB is awesome, man. And we're big fans of yours, so we'd love having you here to talk about it and give us the inside scoop. And again, this is something that we're going to be using quite a bit.
Thank you very much. I mean, you guys also are a credit to growing the audience of MLR. One thing that I've noticed American sports markets and sports fans are nuts about is stats and fantasy. So between us, we've got that cornered.
We got a chokehold on the industry, people.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I can't imagine a more perfect partnership. It's like salt and pepper. It's like it's MLR stats and the Fantasy Ruckers. I think
absolutely.
It really goes hand in hand. So again, check James out, the new venture NA Rugby DB on any social media site. Check out the website narugbydb.com. It's really, really cool. I can't emphasize this enough. Go check it out. Again, a whole bunch of hard work going into it by James.
There's every single game that's ever happened has its own kind of entry. There's every single player. There's, I think, 550 or just shy games. Nearly 1,300 players. They're all on there. Go and find out what happened in a nothing game for 2019. Go and do it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely
Tell me what you
crazy.
find. Tell me stuff.
Everything, apparently. Absolutely everything.
And if you aren't already, make sure you're giving James a follow as well at MLR Stats, which I'm sure will continue to punch out great MLR content on Instagram, and then also at Jam Delay, his Twitter account or his X account, that will have all the good stuff, and you'll be in the know in terms of some of the roster moves that are happening down the pipeline with the multiple pages of offseason moves that are surely coming. That will keep James busy.
And there will be a little summary for every one of those on this website now that I've found out how to write an article.
I cannot wait for it. I cannot wait for it. All right. Well, hey, guys, you guys have anything for the Godfather Deeley of NA Rugby DP before we let him go?
I don't think so. I think we just got to let the stats speak for themselves.
All right. Well, hey, James, again, you're welcome on the show as always. Salt and pepper, ketchup and mustard, the Fantasy Ruckers and MLR Stats. I think that's the new tagline. We'll figure out a way to keep this partnership growing, man. And you're always welcome to the show. Friend of the show. Check him out at NA Rugby DB, at Jam Delay, at MLR Stats. James, thanks for coming on, man. And we'll see you next time. And good luck with all the roster moves that are coming down your way.
Thank you, Les. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man.
Later.
Thank you.
And thank you again to MLR Stats' James Deeley for joining the show. Vandy, what are you laughing about over there? What's wrong? That was an insightful conversation. Is it because I called him? Is it because I called him the Godfather? Is it because I am
can't say
the
it.
Supreme Commissioner?
No, I
Is it
can't say it.
because MLR Stats and the Fantasy Ruckers is salt and pepper?
Yeah. Ooh, threw some flair on that. Peppa.
Yeah, that was good.
Let's do it
That was
again.
good. But hey,
Say it again.
what a
Say it
conversation!
again.
What a salt and pepper.
Ooh.
You like that,
I
huh?
have my note, but I don't know what it is. My ears like that. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
It's tickling
but
my
hey,
brain in a funny way.
what an insightful conversation, though, from James. Again, just a guy that we mentioned in our interview is kind of approaching the same way as us in terms of the love for this league and just trying to grow this thing. And again, that North American Rugby Database, I'm going to be on that site. I already got it bookmarked. I'm going to be on that site all season long, especially when Fantasy MLR hits, in terms of getting the upper leg on you guys and trying to beat you in our Fantasy Workers League. Is that right?
Yeah, okay, you can try. But yeah, James is just a staple of the MLR and has been since the beginning. So it's great that he's a friend of the show, and we're lucky to have him in this world.
Yeah.
In this realm.
In this realm.
That is Major League Rugby. All right, well, hey, let's get to the final segment of the show. It's become my least favorite segment. It's become Vandy's favorite segment for some reason over the past little bit. But it is time for Triple D, Devin's Degenerate Dambles, brought to you by Betstamp. Betstamp, betting made easy. We partnered with Betstamp to create the Fantasy Ruckers Betting Challenge, where Vandy and I started off with $50 and have been trying to make our way through this offseason and lasting the longest or winning the most money. And you could probably tell by the tone of this that this week kind of went the same way as last week, where a little bit of investment was lost, but maybe be the opposite for Vandy. But if you want to join in on the fun, check out the link down below, signupexpert.com/thefantasyruckers, where you can find the sports books that are available in your area and find the best new user betting deals in those locations. And it's all curated in one nice little spot for you. It helps kind of get the word out about rugby and also helps support the show, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, at no cost to you. No additional cost to you. Helps you support the lads.
Yeah, helps us support the lads. All right. Well, let's get into it. Where do we stand when it comes to this Fantasy Ruckers Betting Challenge? Well,
where do we stand? Don't forget who the segment's named after.
That's right.
That's where we stand. I stand on business, boy.
Vandy was dwindling down on the money and how the tables have turned, because Vandy is back.
Tables.
You know what?
Back.
You know what? It was 3D chess is what I just did to Ryan.
Yeah, you did.
Wait. It's what you do in poker games. You get real low on the chips. So they get a little overconfident, and they're making bets that they don't even know they can handle.
Yeah.
They're feeling high about themselves. Boom. And then Daddy, don't forget the pocket aces.
Yeah, talk your crap, Vandy. Talk your crap.
True.
Yeah, Vandy.
I hate the rugby championship because what I will quote what Maddie said is probably the most guaranteed.
Not this one. I didn't say this one. This one was not. This was not the one that I said was a lock. It was the one that you lost last week was a lock. This one. So Vandy just got the better line here.
Anyway, where do we stand?
Vandy just got the better line.
Vandy won a little bit of money. The line is exactly where he hopped in. I hopped in a little bit too early, got the 18.5 of South Africa over Argentina.
No, you got 18.5.
That's what I said.
New Zealand.
Oh, 18.5 New Zealand over Australia.
Yep.
Vandy hopping in a little bit later. I got a little bit excited with the line. He was able to, a lot of the money coming in on New Zealand, push the line to 20.5. And Vandy hopped on it and was able. What was the final score, Maddie?
Wait.
What
was my over-under? 20.5. Maddie, what was the final score?
Cover the spread. The final spread was 33-13 for New Zealand. Australia covered the spread by a half a point.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Half a point.
That's why you play the spread.
Yeah. So 18.5. 18.5 for me, 20.5 for Vandy. Tough one there. So now Vandy has somehow turned the tables and now has $29.99 remaining in his payroll. I have dwindled down to a measly $5.
Yeah, I don't know what to
so
tell
this money, I will say, I still got $2 sitting in my top 14 season-long futures bet that could win me a decent amount of cash. So I'm in it until at least next year. But for the same token, I'm down to $5 here. So this bet is going to mean a whole lot. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. The championship is over. So we'll see where we go from here. Vandy, since you were gone, we turned around on kind of how we do this segment a little bit. I'm coming to the table with some picks that I think are a little bit spicy that I think I could make some money on. Maddie tells me if that's a good idea or not. Again, we don't have the rugby championship, which Matthew is probably the most knowledgeable about.
Nope.
And then we go from there to see whether we can make some picks. Before I get into my picks, Vandy, you're still learning this thing. Do you at all have any picks that you want to get into that you have heading into this? Or are you still going with Maddie's kind of advice here?
I haven't went with Maddie's advice in 3 weeks, and look
All right.
what's turned around for me.
All right. Well, let's start off with the Rugby Premiership. Looking down, got some good ones here, but I think I might choose the one that looks most enticing for me is the Harlequins Northampton game. Harlequins sitting higher on the table. They're the staple name. Again, haven't watched too much Premiership, but that 10.5 point spread does look a little bit spicy for me. The money line, Harlequins are plus 340 underdogs. So I'm only got $5, so maybe like a $2 bet.
Wait, who's the spread for?
Harlequins are underdogs by plus 340. They're getting 10.5 points.
Northampton's kind of
Wait, click that game real quick. The Harlequins versus Northampton.
Yeah. You want the money line?
Yeah, what's the money line? After I was just gassing up the spread. Plus 340.
What do you think, Manny? Or you really like Northampton?
Wait,
I like
Northampton's the
Northampton.
favorite.
I like Northampton. I'm not.
Any picks you see here then that you like in the Premiership?
Who's playing Newcastle? We got Leicester playing Newcastle.
The spread is 10.5 there. That might be a good one.
Oh,
I'm taking Bath.
I would take Leicester to beat the spread there on that one. I don't mind that Bath one, but that's a tough one. I mean,
you ever been to horse races? And then
Yeah.
you like the name of the horse and you just ride.
you just like Bath.
I like
He's
that
gonna
name.
ride Bath. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
8.5
Get in there,
points.
hop in the top.
Bath, Bristol's getting 8.5 points there, so 8.5 points favorites for Bath. Yeah.
Oh, I would go Bristol to cover the spread.
Bristol to cover.
You think
Yeah.
Bristol will cover that?
I think they can cover
Okay.
8.5.
Moving on now. So Maddie likes the Leicester over Newcastle Falcons spread. They're at 10.5. He likes Bristol covering at 8.5 to Bath. We'll move on now to the top. No, I wanted to talk. What did I want to talk about?
Not top 14. We're going into NPC.
I wanted to talk about. Okay, we'll get into NPC. I didn't have a pick for NPC, so why don't you go for me here? I did have a URC pick.
I don't care about URC. What's the NPC spread for Manawatu and counties?
Manawatu is underdogs by 15.5. They're getting 15.5 points.
I would give it to counties.
You think they're gonna win by 15.5?
Counties, they just beat North Harbor like 55-5. Yeah, I think they're gonna beat Manawatu
Okay.
by 15.5 points.
Okay.
What about what do we got? Wellington versus Hawke's Bay.
Wellington is 7.5 point favorites.
Ooh, nah, get Hawke's Bay to cover on that one.
Okay, and then is there any love on the Waikato versus Canterbury? Waikato is 5.5.
No, I'll be quite honest with you guys. NPC's been kind of throwing me for a loop here. It hasn't been good. I can't even tell who the teams are. I've been watching. I've been trying to figure out, but it keeps flip-flopping, and then guys are returning. Guys are getting injured, and I have no clue. I just know Manawatu sucks. That's
Okay.
it.
All right.
That's the one constant in this world.
I just want to bring on URC, just one pick. I am a Leinster fan in the past.
Okay.
Is there
Sharks
any?
versus Gwent Dragons
Is there any?
Yeah, dude. Hammer the over.
of that?
Hammer Sharks just crushing the Newport Gwent Dragons.
Okay.
Is this
Okay.
is this true? Sounds like
What?
you're speaking video game to me.
No, these are the names. There's lots
No,
of leagues,
no.
Vandy. Lots of leagues. I was going to go Leinster as 12.5 point favorites over the Benetton Treviso.
Hey, don't sleep on Benetton.
Okay, that makes me scared. All right, so to put it in a nutshell, we'll have our picks coming out here in our TFR betting challenge brought to you by Betstamp. But it looks like from the
Hey, Ryan, don't put too much money down. 'Cause
I
you're
can't.
gonna lose
I have
all this.
$5 max. I'll probably keep $1. We'll see if we can win. But we're looking at so for the Premiership, Maddie likes Leicester covering the 10.5 over Newcastle.
Either way,
Likes Bristol covering the 8.5 against Bath.
I'm putting the whole
And then-
$30 on it.
In
Do
NPC, Maddie likes Counties Manukau getting that 15.5 points over Manawatu.
Is there
Right.
Can you buy back into this?
I'll take into considerations. We will have to talk about that after this week because I will probably need a buyback coming into it.
Yeah. Well, hey, now we got to think about it. Considerations, future considerations.
Future considerations. That's right. We can trade some.
That's how you
salary
fudge
cap
the books. That's how you
considerations.
fudge the books.
Exactly.
Future
Exactly.
considerations.
All right. Well, hey, anything else you want to tell the people? Conversation with James, betting, anything at all before we let the people go here?
Just stay frosty.
Stay frosty, people. Keep an eye out. Again, there will be a whole bunch of roster moves coming down the line, according to our sources. That includes James and beyond. Definitely a lot of movements going to be happening with the dispersal draft happening last week, allegedly. That should be coming to fruition here in a few weeks' time, hopefully. Fingers crossed. And again, we'll mention it. Follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers. 4 subscribers away from 100. Let's get it. They should send us a paperclip for that. All right. For Matt Yee, for Devin, Vandy, Vanderpool, I am Ryan Yee, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Love is that.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.